It's interesting how you look back at specific decades for movies, and you can definitely tell each movie had a different feel to it. Like, for example, the 1970s movies in particular had a feel of a, an often soft and washed out look, or the 1980s, for example, mostly focusing on stuff like vibrant colors, particularly in the areas of clothing and sets. The 90s, the 1990s in particular, it was all about, a combination of film stock quality and natural color palettes and visual storytelling. Because, we've got, with an emphasis, of course, on building the advancements of visual effects technology with films, of course, like Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park. And that continued to grow into the look of the 2000s movies with the shift towards digital cinema and visual effects, while also retaining some of that stylistic elements of the late 20th century, like stuff with, of course, with Spider-Man, Harry Potter, Star Wars coming back into play, and, of course, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the 2010s, it was kind of really interesting how in 2010 it was very, very different in terms of, like, the heavy influence, of course, was on superhero blockbusters with, as I mentioned before, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the exploration of different genres, and the use of new technology, new ways to kind of to make these movies feel more authentic than they had ever done before. And then you get to the 2020s, which is it's a very interesting type of feel, especially when you consider that, the decade basically began with the world shutting down for several months because of COVID-19, and then a couple years later, we had the big actor and writer strike that shut Hollywood down for most of 2023. So I thought to myself, what does the look of the movies for the 2020s really feel like? What are we looking at when we look at some of the movies that have come out in the 2020s? What's the thing that's been sticking out the most? Some say it's a blend of technological advancements, a return to some film aesthetics, and a shift in how movies are produced and distributed, such as 4K restoration being more widespread, many filmmakers aiming for a film-like aesthetic using digital cinematography, and also a notable trend of color grading with strong tints and a greater emphasis on visually stunning blockbusters. And of course, as I said before, the pandemic significantly impacted distribution, leading to more streaming releases. Which I'm getting most of this information off of Google, which kind of gives you an indication of how most of the movies of each decade really do change a lot. Like, you can definitely tell that specific movies from different decades have a much different feel compared to other movies from other decades. So I really thought to myself, what really is the look of movies in the 2020s? Because honestly, I don't think we've really seen it quite yet, which is really hard to believe, even though we're already halfway through this decade. And yeah, some people would say that it is more of a focus on creating more event pictures for the big screen. Like you've noticed that theaters now, when you go to a movie theater, most of the real hype is behind like big budget movies, big blockbusters, big sequels. It seemed like they're putting more of the emphasis of making that the main theater-going experience, which is both kind of a good thing, but also kind of a bad thing, too, because, you have all these smaller movies, these more independent movies, or these films that don't have big stars behind them, don't have big budgets, that kind of got pushed off to the side. We saw a lot of that early in the spring. A lot of really good movies came out in the first part of the year, but most of you probably didn't see most of those movies, such as, some examples include One of Them Days being one of the examples. Mickey 17 wasn't the big hit that everyone thought it was going to be. Novocaine wasn't the big hit, even though it was the #1 movie at the box office when it came out. Just that kind of example in general. And yeah, it does seem like there's more of an emphasis on making more event pictures to get people in the theaters, but there isn't really much of a general idea of what the overall look of movies in 2020 is. And how do you really describe that? How do you really describe what the real... It's basically what I'm trying to ask is, what do I think the look of movies in the 2020s? Where are we at right now, halfway through the decade? Well, let's go back to that Google article I was reading about, talking about what the look of the movies for the 2020s are. Some of the elaborations they have here: technological advancements. The shift to 4K resolution is almost universal, with most mainstream and indie films being shot in 4K digital intermediate, allowing for great image clarity and detail, enhancing the visual experience, which you can definitely see that, especially with the bigger blockbusters. I mean, I just saw Sinners this past weekend, which I said before was a terrific film, and you could definitely tell seeing that movie on a big screen like that, on a big Cinemark XD screen, really helps you get focused on on the movie itself and really keep you invested in what's going on that front. Another thing they say here, emulating film aesthetics, many filmmakers are actively trying to replicate the look and feel of a film using digital cinematography. This involves techniques using like specific lenses and color grading to achieve a more organic, less digital look. And sometimes it can work. Other times, you can definitely tell there is still an idea of more of a digital look to it. Like one of the good examples of that is Top Gun Maverick. Top Gun Maverick to me felt like it had more of a digital look to it in some parts than it did, but more times than not though, it did feel like a movie where it did feel like a film that it was trying to replicate the feel of the original Top Gun, but for a modern audience. A bad example of this probably would be something like, The Electric State, something we just had that came out on Netflix, which was one of those things where it's just kind of like, you spend all that money and it does not look like a movie that feels like a film that really felt like you were trying to replicate something from the past. You were just trying to create something for the now. And, I'll delve more into that next time, is next time around, but color grading is another thing they say on here. A prominent feature of 2020's films is the use of strong color grading, often featured in intense tints of green, orange, cyan, and purple. While this can be a creative choice, it can also be perceived as jarring by some viewers, which I'm starting to learn more and more that color grading, in not just movies, but anything in particular, might be damaging to some people. Like, I saw a video about CoComelon, the TV series CoComelon, and one of the things they talk about with some of the problems with it is that it uses specific colors that keeps little kids invested in the show, even though it's rotting their brains because they can't look away no matter what happens. And just the way that they use specific colors really could damage their thinking about what you're supposed to do, what you're supposed to teach your kids about it. And yeah, it could kind of make sense to. You can definitely see it more in movies. I think they've done a pretty good job of keeping the color grading stable, but yeah, kind of like what I said before about CoComelon, it kind of makes sense with the idea that it could be jarring for some viewers, and it could be damaging to kids too if you give them a specific amount of colors that they have to pay attention to. Like, it could really damage their thinking overall. But visually stunning blockbusters. The decade has seen a surge in visually impressive blockbusters, particularly in genres like sci-fi and animated films. These films often feature advanced visual effects, impressive cinematography, and striking production design, which you can agree with that as well. And then, as I said here, the impact of the pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic significantly impacted how movies are produced and distributed. The pandemic led to widespread theater closures, delays in releases, and a rapid acceleration in the shift towards streaming services as a primary means of distribution. Which, yeah, when COVID happened, that was kind of a big deal. Like, you couldn't go to the theaters, so yeah, they really didn't have a choice but to put all the money towards streaming in general. The problem with that is, and I'm going to delve more into this next week, because it's going to lead into the topic I have for next week, is that the problem with that is that once we were able to go back outside again after COVID kind of died down a little bit, the Hollywood studios really didn't know how to keep their streaming services alive when the pandemic was over. Like it felt like when the pandemic happened, it was just like perfect timing for a lot of these streamers to come up and just start taking over. But then the pandemic ended and everyone realized, oh shit, we're losing a lot of our viewers, and we really don't know how to keep up the pace in general. Like, there were a lot of projects they announced for these streaming services that once the numbers on how many people actually would come into the new streaming services and all, like, once that went down, that kind of changed everything, because nobody really knew what the hell to do about, basically, like, what the hell we were supposed to do now. And honestly, it's still kind of a problem even by today's standards. Like, I think one of the big problems right now with Hollywood in general is that they're trying too hard. They can't really decide which movies should be made specifically for streaming or which movies should be made specifically for the theatrical going experience. And I think that's something that, as the decade's going to go on, I think we're going to see more and more emphasis on essentially trying to figure out, what movies are going to be made for specific There's like, what movies are we making specifically for theaters, or what movies are we making specifically for streaming? We can't be both ways, because we've seen bad examples of that as of late, specifically with the Apple movies and the aforementioned The Electric State. So just to kind of sum this one up real quickly, what is the look of the movies in the 2020s? It's kind of hard to say, really. I mean, there is more emphasis on event pictures and basically, trying to make every blockbuster or every sequel or every movie that they're putting a lot of money into the next big event picture. Like, everyone wants to have another Barbenheimer, but it worked back then because it was two movies that everyone was looking forward to. But then when everyone was putting these movies back to back on the same days, everyone was trying to create the next Barbenheimer. Remember when they were trying to do that with Gladiator and Wicked 2, with Wicked and Gladiator 2? Yeah, that wasn't like that at all. And they're trying to do it now with Lilo and Stitch and Mission Impossible. Like, they're trying to create another trend, but that's a once-in-a-lifetime thing that you're never going to be able to replicate. I mean, that was the norm back before the pandemic, but the fact that it's now becoming like this thing where it seemed like they were putting more focus on the meme itself and the fact that you've got two really good movies opening up on the same day and opening the same weekend, making for a great theatrical going experience. And again, that's just really something that kind of bugs me a little bit. Like, the future of the movies in general is very much in question about, where the direction of the movies is going to go from here. And for me, just to kind of answer this question overall, what the look of the movies of the 2020s is, it's kind of a mix between these event pictures that the studios are trying really hard to push as something that you have to see in a theater. And even then, they're trying way too hard to get some of these on the streaming services too. And seeing a big budget movie on a streaming service on a television or a small phone like the one I'm recording this on right now, that's something where it's just like, it's really, really hard to make succeed, to make it as successful as you want it to be. And what else can I say about what's another thing that's kind of the look of the movies for nowadays? There is more of an emphasis on a little bit more AI and everything. Like, it's in, when you watch a lot of things nowadays, like if you go on social media and Facebook and Twitter, you always see these AI trends that they're trying to start in general. And it's just, you watch it, it's just kind of like, I'm so glad that Hollywood basically went on strike 2 years ago for basically nothing, because it seems like AI is trying to take over, and not in a good way. Like, it's just, and like, for me it comes down to three things. What the look of the movies of the 2020 is more event pictures, seeming like more of a focus on AI in general, and trying these original movies that are becoming much, much harder to break out in general. I mean, every once in a while you'll get a success every once in a while, like a Sinners, just like we had this weekend, or what was another one we had recently? Or something like from Jordan Peele or Christopher Nolan. Like, we get excited whenever their new movies come out, and they become general house names that we really look forward to seeing them, because they're making movies the way you should be making movies. And that should be kind of a little preview of what I have coming up next week on the show here, because we're going to talk more about this, continuing on. This is kind of like part one of a two-part conversation about where the movies go from here. Like, where do we go with the films from here? We've kind of talked about what the look of the movies of the 2020s is, and it's mostly event pictures, more of an emphasis on AI, and very few original successes, even though a lot of original movies turn out to be actually kind of good overall, but most of them aren't being seen by most people in general, even unless you have a big name behind it, and even then, it's not really carrying the film overall in general. But that's just my thoughts on that. And next week we'll continue the conversation by taking a look at where does the future of movies go from where does the future of the movies go from here? Like, where do we go from this point on? Like, what's the next logical step for the films in general? Who are the people that are trying to keep the movie-going experience as it is? Like, who are the names that are trying to make the movies more eventful by not just doing blockbuster movies or films that are just sequels, reboots, remakes, and trying to do something that has never been done before? And there are several different people that we've kind of talked about in the past, but that's something we'll kind of delve into next time around on here. So that's just kind of this is just kind of a conversation I was thinking to myself of what the look of the films of the 2020s really is all about. And with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you'll be back next week for the conversation to continue on the future of the movies. But if you want to see what I had to say about the 10 movies that inspired me, check out the previous episode. Check out the playlist below to see some of the other videos I've done. And I will see you guys next time. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care.